What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. You guys asked for more, so here we are. These are the 10 cards that didn't make it into the top 10 cards of 2020, but were very close. It was so tough narrowing down this list that I wanted to make another video because I think it's worth discussing a lot of these other cards as well, because 2020 brought with it an abundance of powerful cards that have made their way into the game and are probably going to be staple cards in either main or side decks for years to come. And I really wanted to discuss them. So without further ado, these are the top 10 cards that didn't make it into the top 10 cards of 2020. First up is actually going to be an honorable mention, and that goes to Cimoooooooo. Do you guys remember when Cimoooooooo was first discovered as a way to help counteract Adamancipator in tandem with Barrier Statue of the Torrent? This was like the saving grace of the format for a very short time, albeit it was a little bit gimmicky. I think it's just worth mentioning that this card had such a unique niche and is a card that some people still look to at times to combat combo decks. It's really cool to see how people are able to innovate and come up with things like that, and I definitely felt like it deserved a mention. So starting off with number 10, we are going all the way back to the beginning of 2020 with Legendary Duelist Magical Hero, and it's weird to hear that because typically good cards don't come out of the Legendary Duelist series, but this one was over $100, and that card is Magician Souls. Back in the day, people were looking for any excuse to throw Magician Souls into anything. We had Magician Soul in Spirals, we had Magician Soul in Eldritch, we had Magician Souls in Pendulum. People were looking for any excuse to play this card because it was so free. Being able to effectively draw yourself cards, get rid of dead cards out of your hand, maybe set up for some combos. There was countless synergies that Magician Souls provided that it could have easily made its way onto the top 10 list. I think it was really just held back by being only played in certain decks, and it really just fell out of favor towards the latter half of the year. And in the overall context of things, even though the card is extremely powerful, it just really is conditional in the types of decks that it can be played in, but nonetheless still an incredible card indeed, and that's why it's here at number 10. Now coming in at number 9, we actually have a Shaddoll card, but it wasn't from the Shaddoll structure deck like a lot of people might have thought. It actually came from a core set, and that card is Shaddoll Schism. Shaddoll Schism was a very powerful card because it allowed you to be able to banish cards from your graveyard to be able to fusion summon, and with setup from Dogmatica, it allowed you to be able to summon Winda in non-Shaddoll oriented decks. By being able to send these cards from the extra deck to the graveyard through the Dogmatica engine, it allowed you to make this sort of splashable Winda that was actually a nice counter to some of the combo decks that relied so heavily on special summoning. And if the decks didn't have a way to out Winda, this gave control decks a window to be able to just win game ones left and right because their opponent really didn't have a way to deal with it, and Shaddoll Schism is to thank for that. Shaddoll Schism is part of the reason why any sort of Shaddoll variant is competitively viable. There are plenty of cards that also came from the Shaddoll structure deck that help it as well, but I think Schism is really what took it over the top, and it's what the deck needed, and it's cool to see that it's also playable outside of the archetype and can be splashed, and so that's why it came in at number 9. Now next up at number 8, we have another trap card, and I think the trap cards are naturally going to be at the bottom of the list just because they're traps, so it's a little bit harder to justify them at times, but this is one hell of a trap card. Like, you thought Shaddoll Schism was good, this one is probably way better by comparison, and that card is Ice Dragon's Prison. I remember when this card was only a couple of dollars, and now it is like, what, 20, 30 bucks a copy? This card is incredible. This is effectively like a trap version of Called by the Grave, but it can also banish your opponent's monsters at the same time. Like, how good is that? That's insane. By being able to use Ice Dragon's Prison to resurrect one of their monsters, have the other monster that's already face up on the field, and just banish both of them, you're killing two birds with one stone. This card is incredibly versatile, has a lot of really neat uses, and I really want to see more trap cards like this moving forward. One of the biggest issues when it comes to trap cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that you have to set them face down for a turn before you can even activate them, and so they need to be over the top busted most of the times for people to even justify playing them, and Ice Dragon's Prison definitely makes it worth it. It's rare that that happens, but I'm really happy that we got to see it, and I really want to see them explore trap cards that are this powerful and this unique for that matter moving forward. So Ice Dragon's Prison coming in at number 8. Arriving in at number 7, we have Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon. This is a card that just falls right in line with the Crystron Halki Fibrax Link Cross shenanigans, and at one point, some people were looking to this card to get hit on the ban list because of its token producing capabilities, very similar to that of Link Cross. But once Link Cross was printed, I think it kind of just made Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon a little bit irrelevant. Sure, some people still play Auroradon in combo decks, but Link Cross kind of does what Auroradon does, but better in some instances. But it was a key component of the Synchro Eldritch deck that was at the top tiers of competitive play for a couple of months, and we'll still see play in combo decks just because there's so many cool synergies that the card provides. Auroradon was printed in Dual Overload, which, let's be honest, was responsible for most of the broken Link monsters printed in 2020, so it's very fitting that that's where it was printed, and honestly, I couldn't see it any other way. So Auroradon coming in at number 7. But coming in at number 6, we're going to fast forward a bit here all the way till the end of 2020 and Phantom Rage. Phantom Rage was responsible for a slew of incredibly powerful cards, and one of them was Alpha Master of Beasts. This is the 2020 Pankratops, as a lot of people have called it, and for good reason. The card can special summon itself out for free. While it doesn't necessarily pop cards, it's able to bounce them back, but then, unlike Pankratops, it's able to special summon itself onto the field again and can start just attacking over threats because it has a massively high attack power. This is going to be a great side deck staple for years to come, and what I like the most about Alpha is that, as powerful of a card as it is, I actually feel like it's kind of fair in the grand scheme of things. It's actually a great board breaker, it's a great going second tool, and I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs a lot of these to kind of help keep the game in check, and so again, very easy contender for the top 10 most powerful cards, but just slightly missed out for good reason. So Alpha is going to make it in at number 6. I can't believe we're already halfway through the list. It just seems to fly by so fast, but I guess 2020 kind of felt like that in general, so I guess it's rather appropriate. We're going to take a trip back to Dual Overload because we are not done with broken Link monsters just yet. So coming in at number 5, we have Union Carrier. Now, going back in the context of Dual Overload, obviously Crystron Halki Fibrax was the chase card, but Union Carrier I felt like wasn't too far behind because although it wasn't nearly as explosive, Union Carrier was deceptively powerful. Being able to equip cards directly from your deck to monsters that you already have on your field, you were able to access your engine when maybe you didn't otherwise draw it. This was actually a boon at the time for a deck like Orchist, which was still struggling to kind of figure out its identity and actually gave it an easy way to access part of its engine. But subsequently, people quickly figured out how to abuse the card much more heavily in tandem with a card like Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. Why would you grab your engine pieces when you can equip a Dragon Buster to any of your monsters that are on the field as long as they're Dark or Dragon and just lock your opponent out of the extra deck? That seems pretty fair, right? The card became even more abusable once Adamancipator was released in Secret Slayers, and people figured out that they could just access Block Dragon directly from their deck to help just get all the cards they could possibly need to fuel their hand. So it's no surprise that Union Carrier was insanely busted, but I think over time as power creep progressed, as Adamancipator got put in check because of the banning of Block Dragon, Union Carrier started to slowly fade away because its main purpose was just to equip Dragon Buster Destruction Sword to any target, and while Dragon Link and other decks would do that, for the most part, that was its primary purpose, not really being used as an engine piece. But Union Carrier still sees a reasonable amount of play even to this very day in a plethora of combo decks, and will probably continue to see play as long as people find ways to abuse it. And so that's why Union Carrier had to come in at number 5. But coming in at number 4, we're not done with Dual Overload just yet because we have one more card to discuss. I think it's a pretty close tie between Union Carrier and this card because that card is Verte Anaconda. These cards do very similar things in a way in that they allow you to tutor for cards that are usually much more difficult for you to access. While Union Carrier gets you to engine pieces and maybe stuff like Dragon Buster Destruction Sword to lock out your opponent, Verte Anaconda just spits out fusion spells and allows you to access cards like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon or even Rainbow Neos. You guys remember Rainbow Neos when that card was seeing play when Eldritch was considered the best deck of the format? I do, because that was utterly insane. I love to see a card like Rainbow Neos actually seeing competitive play in 2020, and that's why I love the design of Verte Anaconda so much. Yes, it does enable one of the strongest boss monsters of all time, but the card did so much more because you could access cards like Rainbow Neos. You could access cards like Thunder Dragon Titan. You Thunder Dragon players know what I'm talking about because just any way to access fusion spells, Verte Anaconda was very good at that. Not to mention, Super Polymerization is also a card, so even going second, the card wasn't too bad. While Verte Anaconda's success is kind of tied to the hip with Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, the card doesn't see maybe as much play as something like Union Carrier still does, but as long as Red Eye's Dark Dragoon stays legal, Verte Anaconda is going to be very playable, and I still think it's so cool that we got to see a card like Rainbow Neos actually see competitive play. We are down to just 3 cards remaining, and it is so difficult to weigh these cards against one another. It comes down to the slimmest of margins, and it's all contextual, right? So let's be honest, any of these could be number 1. But for number 3, we're going to Phantom Rage, and to be honest, people quite literally shit themselves when they saw this card, because this card was 3 banned cards in 1, and that card is Triple Tactics Talent. Which do you prefer? Pot of Greed, Forceful Sentry, or Change of Heart? Take your pick, because Triple Tactics Talent does it all. At the ridiculously laughable cost of your opponent activating a monster effect during your turn, you can slap down Triple Tactics Talent, and you can activate any one of those 3 effects. And in most cases, they're all going to be live. Most people want to draw 2, that's typically the best, but if you want to take control of one of your opponent's monsters, that's great too. Or how about being able to see your opponent's hand if they have any hand traps and be able to telegraph everything they're going to do during their turn? The card is just busted. What's fascinating about Triple Tactics Talent is that when it was first released, it actually didn't see the biggest amount of play, and I guess that's just because the meta didn't really accommodate for it, but eventually people started to realize how powerful the card truly was. The format shifted in a way where Triple Tactics Talent was very powerful, and now you see people playing it in multiple copies in almost every single deck. Triple Tactics Talent is also one of those cards that really warps the format, and you have to play in a completely different way than you had before. Before, people just freely fired off hand traps. If they got called by the grave, sure, but there really wasn't much risk. Now with this card around, this could be the reason you lose the game, because this card is that backbreaking, and I find it so fascinating when cards like this are released, because they really just recondition how people play the game. And so what could be better than Triple Tactics Talent? Well, we're sticking with Phantom Rage because there was another spell card printed in that set that definitely gives it a run for its money, and like I said, either one of these could have been above the other, but that card is Forbidden Droplet. The reason I have Forbidden Droplet over Triple Tactics Talent is purely based on the fact that it saw more play than the card. Forbidden Droplet is so good because it's able to help you break your opponent's board, and at a time where people were really complaining about combo decks and how unstoppable they really seemed, Forbidden Droplet came at the perfect time. The card is just so flexible, right? I mean, it's a quick play spell, so that's a great start. It also halves the attack of the monsters that you target with it, so that's very good. Your opponent can't respond to it, which typically I don't like that form of interaction, but since this primary focus is against combo decks that are already preventing you from playing the game, I'm kind of okay with it. And if that weren't enough, it also has the ability to send cards that were already activated in the same chain to the graveyard to fulfill its cost, so you can actually get value out of this card where you might not be able to get value out of other cards, and I think that's really, really neat. The Forbidden series of spells has always been rather prominent when you look to cards like Forbidden Lance, Forbidden Chalice, and I think Forbidden Droplet is just the next in that line. So what it boils down to is I think I prefer the flexibility of a card like Droplet over the immeasurable power of something like Triple Tactics Talent, because I think overall that's going to pay off more in the long run and not necessarily be so format dependent. But when we're in the echelon of Triple Tactics Talent and Forbidden Droplet, what could possibly be in the number 1 slot? Well, we're going to go back to Eternity Code for this one, and it's actually the cover monster. As a matter of fact, that monster is Access Code Talker. Similar to how Borrelsword Dragon impacted the format when it was initially released a few years ago, I think Access Code Talker definitely deserves to be in that number 1 spot. This is almost an easier way to OTK your opponent than Borrelsword Dragon in some instances. Although you may not be able to reach that damage threshold all the time, Access Code Talker does a pretty good job, allowing it to get up to stratospheric heights in terms of attack power. The fact that your opponent can't respond to it, when Access Code Talker hits the field, it is just game over 99 times out of 100, and it really provided a win condition for a lot of decks that sometimes had difficulty closing out games. And so how can you really beat that in terms of a card's influence throughout 2020? When Access Code Talker was first released, people were looking for any excuse to play this card, right? I mean, the fact that you have combo decks playing it, control decks loved it because they had a way to put a clock on their opponent if they saw an opening. I mean, there was very few decks that really did not not want to play Access Code Talker, and that still holds true today to some degree. The players even came up with new and ingenious ways to get to Access Code Talker with little to no effort. I mean, with Crystron Halki Fibrax allowing you to go into Selene, and then Selene can resurrect something like Effect Veiler, which you got off of the Halki Fibrax. As long as you could get to Halki Fibrax, you could get to Access Code Talker and almost win the game right then and there. There are countless decks that are so grateful to have an alternate win condition like this, because at the end of the day, these decks may not even be competitive if it weren't for a card like Access Code Talker being released. And so for those reasons, that's why I put Access Code Talker at my number 1 of the top 10 cards that could have made the top 10 cards of 2020. So guys, that's gonna wrap it up for the video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think, and if there's any cards you think I left out, I'd really love to hear your thoughts and get a nice discussion going down in the comments section. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you really found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.